Welcome to Stories with Grandma Joan. I'm so glad you came. Today we will be reading Chapter 3 of The Road to Oz by Frank L. Baum. And this chapter is called A Queer Village. Do you know what queer means? Queer means kind of strange, kind of unusual, sometimes kind of hard to understand. Okay, A Queer Village. Button-Bright took the Shaggy Man's hand willingly, for the Shaggy Man had the love magnet, which was the reason Button-Bright had loved him at once. They started on, with Dorothy on one side, Toto on the other, the little party trudging along more cheerfully than you might have supposed. The girl was getting used to queer adventures, which interested her very much. Wherever Dorothy went, Toto was sure to go, like Mary's little lamb. Button-Bright didn't seem a bit afraid or worried because he was lost, and the Shaggy Man had no home, perhaps, and was as happy in one place as in any other place. Before long, they saw ahead of them a fine big arch spanning the road, and when they came nearer, they found that the arch was beautifully carved and decorated with rich, beautiful colors. A row of peacocks with spread tails ran along the top of it, and all the feathers were gorgeously painted. In the center was a large fox's head, and the fox wore a shrewd and knowing expression on his face, and had large spectacles. These are spectacles. And had large spectacles over his eyes, and a small golden crown with shiny points on top of his head. While the travelers were looking with curiosity at this beautiful arch, there suddenly marched out of it a company of soldiers, only the soldiers were all foxes dressed in uniforms. They wore green jackets and yellow pantaloons, and their little wooden caps and their high boots were a bright red color. Also, there was a big red bow tied about the middle of each long bushy tail. Each fox soldier was armed with a wooden sword having an edge of sharp teeth set in a row, and the sight of these teeth at first caused Dorothy to shudder. This is shudder. That's what shudder means. A captain marched in front of the company of fox soldiers, with his uniform embroidered with gold braid to make it handsomer than the others. Almost before our friends realized it, the soldiers had surrounded them on all sides, and the captain was calling out in a harsh voice, "Surrender! You are our prisoners!" "What's a prisoner?" asked Button-Bright. "A prisoner is a captive," replied the fox captain, strutting up and down with much dignity. "What's a captive?" asked Button-Bright. "You're one," said the captain. That made the Shaggy Man laugh. "Good afternoon, Captain," he said, bowing politely to all the foxes and very low to their commander, the captain. "I trust you are in good health, and your families are all well?" said the Shaggy Man. The fox captain looked at the Shaggy Man, and his sharp features grew pleasant and smiling. "We're pretty well, thank you, Shaggy Man," said he, and Dorothy knew that the love magnet was working, and that all the foxes now loved the Shaggy Man because of it. But Toto didn't know this, for he began barking angrily and tried to bite the captain's hairy leg where it showed between his red boots and his yellow pantaloons. "Stop, Toto!" cried the little girl, seizing the dog in her arms. "These are our friends." "Why, so we are," remarked the captain in tones of astonishment. "I thought at first that we were enemies, but it seems you are friends instead. You must come with me to the King Dox." "Who's he?" asked Button-Bright with earnest eyes. "King Dox of Foxville, the great and wise sovereign who rules over our country." "What's a sovereign and what's a community?" replied Button-Bright. "Don't ask so many questions, little boy." "Why?" Why indeed!" exclaimed the captain, looking at Button-Bright admiringly. "If you don't ask questions, you will learn nothing. True enough. I was wrong. You're a very clever little boy, come to think of it, a very clever one indeed. But now, friends, Please come with me, for it is my duty to escort you at once to the royal palace." The soldiers marched back through the archgate, and with them marched the Shaggy Man, Dorothy, Toto, and of course Button-Bright. Once through the opening, they found a fine big city spread out before them. All the houses of carved marble were in beautiful colors. The decorations were mostly birds and other fowl, a fowl is a bird, such as peacocks, pheasants, turkeys, prairie chickens, ducks, and geese. Over each doorway was carved a head representing the fox who lived in that house, and this effect was quite pretty and unusual. As our friends marched along, some of the foxes came on to the porches and balconies to get a view of the strangers. These foxes were all handsomely dressed. The girl foxes and the women foxes were wearing gowns made of feathers and woven together effectively and colored in bright hues, which Dorothy thought were quite artistic and decidedly attractive. Button-Bright stared until his eyes were big and round, and he would have stumbled and fallen more than once had not the Shaggy Man grasped his hand tightly. They were all interested, and Toto was so excited he wanted to bark every minute to chase and fight every fox he caught sight of. But Dorothy held his little wiggly body so tight in her arms and commanded him to be good and behave himself. So he finally quieted down like a wise doggy, deciding there were too many foxes in Foxville to fight at one time anyway. By and by they came to a big square, and in the center of the square stood the royal palace. Dorothy knew it at once because it had over its door the carved head of a fox, just like the one she had seen on the arch, and this fox was the only one who wore a golden crown. There were many fox soldiers guarding the door. They had bowed to the captain and admired him without any questions. The captain led them through many rooms, where beautifully dressed foxes were sitting on beautiful chairs or sipping tea, which was being passed around by fox servants in white aprons. They came to a big doorway covered with heavy curtains and a cloth of gold. Beside the doorway stood a huge drum. The fox captain went to this drum and knocked his knees against it. First one knee and then the other, so that the drum said boom, boom. "You must all do exactly what I do," ordered the captain. So the Shaggy Man pounded the drum with his knees, and so did Dorothy, and so did Button-Bright. The boy wanted to keep on pounding on it, but his little knees, because he liked the sound of it, but the captain stopped him. Toto couldn't pound the drum with his knees, and he didn't know enough to wag his tail against it. So Dorothy pounded the drum for him, and that made him bark, and when the little dog barked, the fox captain scowled. The golden curtains drew back open, far enough to make an opening through which marched the captain with the others. The broad, long room they entered was decorated in gold, with stained glass windows of splendid colors, and in the center of the room, upon a richly carved golden throne, sat the Fox King himself, surrounded by a group of other foxes, all of whom wore great spectacles over their eyes, making them look solemn and important. Dorothy knew the king at once because she had seen his head carved on the arch over the doorway of the palace. Having met with several other kings in her travels, she knew what to do, and at once she made a long, low bow before the throne. That means in front of the throne. The Shaggy Man bowed too, and Button-Bright bobbed his head and said, "Hello." "Most wise and noble potentate of Foxville," said the captain, addressing the king in a pompous voice, "I humbly beg to report that I found these strangers on the road leading to your foxy majesty's dominion, and have therefore brought them before you, as is my duty." "So," said the king, looking at them keenly. "What brought you here, strangers?" "Our legs, may it please you, Royal Highness," replied the Shaggy Man. "What is your business here?" was the next question. "To get away as soon as possible," said the Shaggy Man. The king didn't know about the magnet, of course, but it made him love the Shaggy Man at once. "Do just as you please about going away," he said, "but I'd like to show you the sights of my city to entertain your little party while you are here. We feel highly honored to have little Dorothy with us, I assure you, and we appreciate her kindness in making us a visit. For whatever country Dorothy visits is sure to become famous," he said. This speech greatly surprised the little girl, who asked, "But, Your Majesty, how did you know my name?" "Why, everybody knows your name, dear," said the Fox King. "Don't you realize you are quite an important person, since Princess Ozma of Oz made you her friend?" "Do you know Ozma?" asked Dorothy. "I regret to say that I do not," he answered sadly, "but I hope to meet her soon. You know the Princess Ozma is to celebrate her birthday on the 21st of this very month." "Is she?" said Dorothy. "I didn't know that." "Yes, it is to be the most brilliant royal ceremony ever held in any city in Fairyland, and I hope you will try to get me an invitation." Dorothy thought a moment. "I'm sure Ozma would invite you if you asked her," she said. "But how could you get to the Land of Oz and the Emerald City? It's a good way from Kansas." "Why, yes, we are in Kansas now, aren't we?" "Kansas?" the captain said. "Why, yes, we are in Kansas now, aren't we?" said Dorothy. "What a strange notion!" cried the Fox King, beginning to laugh. "Whatever made you think this is Kansas?" "Well, I left Uncle Henry's farm only 2 hours ago. That's the reason," she said, rather confused. "But tell me, my dear, did you ever see so wonderful a city as Foxville in Kansas?" he questioned. "No, Your Majesty," she said. "And haven't you traveled from Oz to Kansas in less than half a jiffy by means of the silver shoes and the magic bell? Remember those?" "Yes, Your Majesty," she acknowledged. "Then why do you wonder that an hour or two could bring you to Foxville, which is nearer to Oz than it is to Kansas?" said the captain. "Dear me!" exclaimed Dorothy. "Is this another fairy adventure?" "It seems to be," said the Fox King, smiling. Dorothy turned to the Shaggy Man, and her face was grave and reproachful as she said, "Are you a magician, Shaggy Man? Or a fairy in disguise?" she asked. "Did you enchant me when you asked the way to Butterfield?" The Shaggy Man shook his head. "Whatever is a shaggy fairy?" he replied. "No, Dorothy, my dear, I'm not to blame for this journey in any way, I assure you. There's been something strange about me ever since I owned the Love Magnet, but I don't know what it is any more than you do." "Never mind," said Dorothy thoughtfully. "There isn't so much to see in Kansas as there is here, and I guess Aunt Em won't be very much worried. That is, if I don't stay away too long." And the Shaggy Man said, "I'll go with you willingly and do my best to help you." "That's right," declared the Fox King, nodding approval. "Be contented with your lot, whatever happens to you. If you are wise, that's what you'll do." "Which reminds me," the captain went on, "that you have a new companion on this adventure. He looks very clever and bright." "He is," said Dorothy, and the Shaggy Man added, "That's his name, your royal foxiness, Button-Bright." And that is the end of chapter 3. I'm excited to find out what happens in chapter 4. The next chapter is called King Dox. So I will see you next time. Have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.